Pacey knew there was no way she could explain this clearly, so she promptly changed the subject. Sister Monley, come take a look. How do you pronounce this letter? Even my older brother can't read it, but you surely can. Please teach me. As she listened to Monley's somewhat unpolished pronunciation, Pacey couldn't help but regret ever having suggested such a silly idea. What hurt the most was having to put on an utterly impressed, deeply admiring expression and gaze up at Monley with adoring eyes. Xiao Bao and Shirtu also joined in, imitating her strange accent in their own quirky way, leaving Pacey laughing so hard she could hardly straighten up. Seeing that she'd gained 2 more students, Monley became even more enthusiastic about teaching, and Pacey, barely holding back her laughter, followed along behind. The lively and bustling lesson flew by in a flash, and it was already nearing noon. Pacey gently reminded the completely absorbed Monley, Sister Monley, the sun is high now. It's time to go home and have lunch. No sooner had she finished speaking than suddenly, from outside the courtyard gate, came hurried footsteps accompanied by Auntie's shrill voice calling out, Mike, Madeline, are you home? The couple exchanged a glance and hurriedly went out to greet her. They saw Auntie standing at the door, clutching Heisey, who was sobbing uncontrollably, while a strange man wearing a polyester shirt stood behind her. The man held a canvas bag printed with the word Shanghai and stared at Pacey with a complex expression. What's going on, sister-in-law? Madeline quickly stepped forward. Auntie slapped her thigh hard and burst into tears, wailing, What else could possibly go wrong? Your Pacey wants to go to school. Why on earth is she dragging my Heisey along as some kind of scapegoat? Let me tell you, Madeline, this matter has to be straightened out today. Before she could finish speaking, the stranger suddenly took a step forward, his voice trembling as he asked, You your Pacey? Pacey's heart skipped a beat. This face, it somehow seemed strangely familiar to her. Just before she died in her past life, her mother had secretly slipped an old photograph into her hands. The man in that photo looked exactly like the one standing right in front of her now. Who are you? Mike stepped forward, guarding Pacey with a wary expression. The man pulled out a silver lock from his canvas bag. The lock was engraved with the character Qian, and it gleamed in the sunlight. I'm Pacey's biological father. Back then, Madeline and I, you're lying. Madeline's face turned deathly pale as she abruptly interrupted him. Pacey is my child, born after 10 months of pregnancy. Don't you dare spread such rumors. Auntie Bai's eyes lit up, and she suddenly stopped crying. Oh, so Pacey isn't a Zhou family member after all. No wonder she's so clever and sassy. She even dared to compete with our Heisey for a school spot. Pacey's mind felt like it was buzzing. Fragments of memories from her previous life flooded back. Her mother had told her on her deathbed that her biological father had been a sent-down youth in the city, who'd abandoned them both when he returned to the city. It was Mike who'd kindly taken them in. But this silver lock, it was exactly the same as the one her mother had given her. It was I who wronged both of you, the man said, his voice choked with emotion. Now I've become an official in the city, and I can take Pacey to live there and study. I'll cover all her tuition and living expenses. As soon as she said that, my aunt's face instantly turned pale. She grabbed Heisey and hurried over, saying, Comrade, our Heisey is just as smart. Could we take him to the city together? Mike was so furious that his whole body was trembling. He pointed at Madeline and shouted, You've been hiding this from me all these years. Madeline burst into tears and sobbed, I was just afraid Pacey would feel wronged. Mike, I've been sincere toward you and this family. Suddenly, Pacey spoke up in a clear, bright voice. I'm not going with you. She walked over to Mike and took his hand. You're my dad, Madeline's my mom, and this is my home. Her biological father stood frozen in shock, while my aunt frantically stomped her feet, exclaiming, You silly girl. The city has candy to eat and new clothes to wear. Have you lost your mind? But Pacey turned to Heisey, who looked utterly dejected, and suddenly broke into a smile. Brother Heisey, if you really want to go to school, I'll ask my dad to teach you how to read. We can take the exam together and head to the city. No need to worry about what others think. Heisey suddenly looked up, his eyes shining with excitement. As the biological father gazed into Pessy's determined eyes, the silver lock in his hand clattered onto the floor. Seeing that her plan had fallen through, the aunt started throwing a tantrum again. No way. Today, the tuition fee has to be paid by the Zhou family. After all, Pessy isn't even a Zhou. Enough, Mike suddenly bellowed, stepping out of the house and pulling a wooden box from inside. Inside was a stack of crisp, brand-new bills. I'll cover Pessy's tuition. And if Heisey wants to go to school, I'll pay for that too. But if you dare say another word that's not true, don't ever call me your brother again. It turned out that Mike had secretly worked part-time at the town's brick kiln for half a month, all to scrape together enough money for the kids' tuition fees. Madeline stared at the money in the wooden box, tears streaming down her face even more profusely. The biological father picked up the silver lock, gave a bitter smile, and said, all right, girl. From now on, I'll send you money every month. Consider it my way of making up for what I've done. Having said that, he turned away with a forlorn expression and walked off. Seeing that the money was secured and Heisey's schooling arranged, the aunt-in-law hesitantly pulled Heisey over and apologized. It was my fault, sister-in-law. I shouldn't have said those crude things. Pacey watched everything unfolding before her heart filled with mixed emotions. She never imagined that a simple request to go back to school after being reborn would unravel so many secrets. And the wad of cash, still damp with MC's sweat, warmed her heart even more than the silver locket her biological father had given her. This was truly where her home lay. With just over 10 days left until the start of the school year, MC and Mrs. Zhou were discussing taking the kids to visit relatives. Hey, Mom, MC said. The house hasn't been busy these past few days, and the kids haven't even stepped outside the yard once. Let's take them out to visit some relatives while we still have time before school starts. Madeline also wanted to get some fresh air, so she wholeheartedly agreed with the idea. Honey, I've been thinking the same thing lately too. We really ought to take the kids out for a little stroll and let them get some fresh air. Madeline headed to the general store at the edge of the village, bought some hard candies, and packed a few duck eggs from home into a cloth bag. She washed the children's faces again and again, then took a moment herself to tidy up a bit. For once, De Bao was unusually obedient, letting Madeline wash his face for him. His face was surprisingly clean, his features sharply defined and handsome. Truly a lovely little boy. Visiting relatives was always a favorite pastime for the kids. In those days, there were no TVs, no computers, and no kids' playlands, but visiting relatives meant delicious treats, an opportunity to go on a little journey, and best of all, even if they got mischievous, it was all forgiven. It was simply the greatest form of entertainment for every child. So when De Bao heard they were heading over to his aunt's place, he jumped up with excitement. Xiao Bao happily scampered right behind De Bao, and Arya, caught up in the cheerful atmosphere, giggled happily. Mike and Mrs. Zhou each rode one of the oldest, high-front bar bicycles. Mike's bike, which had been used for years to travel through villages and towns, was long since worn out. Pacey gave it a disdainful glance before climbing onto the back of Madeline's bike. Mike was sitting on the driver's seat, with Xiaobao perched on the passenger side and De Bao in the front, leading the way. Madeline was bringing Pessy and Arya at the back, and the whole family set off. De Bao was always restless, constantly squirming around in the car. After nearly falling out of the vehicle for the third time, Mike couldn't hold back any longer and gave him a stern warning. De Bao, if you don't behave yourself right this minute, I'll send you straight home to stay by yourself while the 5 of us go on our way. Wow, such a long sentence delivered in one smooth breath without so much as a pause or a gasp. It clearly showed that Mike's patience had reached its absolute limit. Pessy glanced over at De Bao's disgruntled face and couldn't help but giggle secretly. Seeing his little sister laughing at him made De Bao feel irritated and tempted to snap at her, but he didn't dare, for fear of angering Mike and getting sent home all alone. Still, he couldn't bear being laughed at, so he stuck out his tongue in a fierce grimace, raised his fist high, and even shook it menacingly as a threat. Little did he know that Pessy just laughed even harder. De Bao rolled his eyes, stuck out his long tongue, and used his hand to pull up the corners of his eyes high, making a ridiculous grimace. At that moment, even Arya couldn't help but burst into laughter. Hearing both Arya and his older sister laughing, Xiao Bao, unable to see what was happening behind him, grew anxious and started scratching his head and ears. "Brother, what are you guys doing?" Arya, whose speech wasn't quite clear yet, replied, "Brother's making funny faces." Xiao Bao just had to take a peek at De Bao's grimace. Mike, thoroughly annoyed by all the commotion, got out of the car and gave De Bao a stern lecture. Then, he reached into the cloth bag hanging from the car's headrest and pulled out a few pieces of candy, shoving them into Xiao Bao's hands until the little boy finally calmed down. Pacey and Arya each received 2 pieces as well. Pacey peeled one piece open and popped the round, hard candy into her mouth. She took a couple of bites, savoring its sweet taste. This kind of candy still reminded her of her childhood. Now that she'd grown up, she wished she could buy it again, but it was nowhere to be found. Pacey thought this candy was actually much tastier than the gummies and milk candies that would become popular years later. A delicate apple flavor lingered in her mouth, and one piece of this candy could often last half a day, making it kids' favorite snack. De Bao received the harshest punishment from Mike and didn't get a single piece of candy. Watching his younger siblings happily savoring their sweets made his eyes well up with tears, and he swallowed hard, looking utterly forlorn. Seeing De Bao's pitiful expression, Pacey's heart softened once again. She gave him a subtle wink and, while their parents' car was still relatively close, slipped another piece of candy into his hand. Overjoyed and completely taken by surprise, De Bao stretched out his arms to catch it, careful not to make a sound that might alert Mike. He quietly peeled off the wrapper and popped the candy into his mouth. Instantly, that sweet taste spread throughout his entire being, filling him with such happiness that he felt utterly lost in bliss. In De Bao's eyes, Pacey instantly became the good sister, and all the earlier teasing she'd given him seemed like a distant memory. /P. This journey has been so much fun. Before we knew it, we were already spotting the little orchard at my aunt's place. Aunt Zhou Fong, from afar, spotted her younger brother and his family approaching and greeted them with great joy. The adults exchanged warm greetings, while the children kept themselves busy too. De Bao and Xiaolei, who's just 1 year younger, headed off to play. Pacey took Xiao Bao and Xiaomei along, and Arya insisted on tagging along as well. Reluctantly, Pacey once again found herself playing nanny. Xiaomei is the same age as Pacey this year, but she's missing 2 front teeth, and when she smiles, a tiny, dark hole appears in her mouth. She was all over Pacey, acting super affectionate and chattering away nonstop. Pacey has always had a close bond with Xiaomei, who's the same age as her. In a past life, Pacey and Xiaomei went to the same school and were in the same class for 5 years, and being cousins, their bond was naturally even deeper than most others. Plus, Xiaomei has always been such a sweet and likable girl. Compared to her pretty but somewhat aloof cousin Monli and her delicate little sister, Zhou Xiaoya, Pacey prefers the down-to-earth, genuine and utterly unpretentious Wu Mei. Still, Xiaomei has one harmless little flaw. "Pai Shi, it's been ages since you've come over to our place for a visit. I've really missed you. The other day, I was even planning to drop by your house, but my mom insisted she was too busy and wouldn't take me along. You're such a blessing. You're here today. Come on, let's go. I'll show you our grape arbor. It's loaded with grapes. Hurry up, I'll pick some for you to taste. Let me tell you, the grapes are so delicious now. They used to be pretty tart, but now they're just right, not sour at all. My mom picked some to give to the neighbors, and she even picked some to sell at the market. She even bought me a hair tie while she was there." Xiaomei turned her head back toward Pai Shi, letting her see the red hair tie she was wearing. "Isn't it pretty?" "It's beautiful," Pai Shi said simply. Then, without pause, Xiaomei started talking nonstop again. "I really love this red one, too. I'm thinking of asking Mom to buy me another one in a different color. Which one do you think looks better, yellow or blue?" When she's with Xiaomei, all she has to do is listen to her talk. Pacey just nods along and occasionally says, "Okay." Xiaomei really does have a natural gift for being easygoing, and she's still the same way even now, as an adult. Pessy pretends to be listening attentively to Xiaomei, but her mind has already drifted off to the far reaches of the sky. Still, Xiaomei doesn't really need Pessy to say anything at all. From beginning to end, all she hears is Xiaomei mumbling a bit unclearly here and there, yet it's actually quite lively. The aunt's place is huge, with 3 tiled houses built on it. A large open space in front of the house is enclosed by a fence, and inside, they've planted some fruit trees. It's perhaps a bit of an exaggeration to call it an orchard, but there are indeed several pear, apple, and peach trees, plus a couple of grape trellises. In the middle of the open space, they've also planted some Chinese cabbage and other vegetables. Right now, most of the other fruits are out of season, but grapes are in their prime, so Xiaomei leads Pessy and Xiaobao over to the grape trellis to pick grapes. The grape trellis is a bit high, Xiaomei can't reach it. Pessy, who's taller, stood on tiptoes and picked a small bunch of purple grapes. Xiaobao and Arya started clamoring to have some. Xiaomei was about to pop a grape into Xiaobao's mouth, but Pessy stopped her, saying they needed to wash the grapes first before eating them. Xiaomei looked a bit surprised and said, "Just eat them like this. There's nothing wrong with them. My brother and I usually eat them this way, without washing very often." Yeah. I want to eat them right now. No need to wash. Xiaobao's mouth was watering with anticipation. Pessy slapped Xiaobao's hand away and said, "There are bacteria on the grapes. If you don't wash them properly, they're not safe to eat." "What's bacteria?" Xiaomei and Xiaobao asked in unison. Pessy wasn't sure how to explain what bacteria were to these little kids. After thinking for a moment, she tried to use words Xiaobao could understand. "If you eat those grapes without washing them, worms will grow inside your tummy, and it'll hurt really badly. Dad'll call Dr. Feng over to give you a shot in the butt." "I don't want any shots. I hate shots the most." As soon as Xiaobao heard the word shot, he'd get scared. Dr. Feng gave shots with real force, and his bottom would hurt for at least 2 or 3 days. After getting the shot, Xiaobao would even limp when he walked. From childhood until now, Xiaobao had suffered quite a bit at the hands of Dr. Feng. Just hearing the words Dr. Feng made him tremble with fear. In the courtyard of Xiaomei's family, there was a small, homemade well. Back then, every household had one of these wells. The underground pipe went down several meters deep, while the part above ground was about half a person's height. To get water, you'd scoop up a bowlful and pour it into the round, narrow mouth of the well, then press hard on the well handle. Before long, clear groundwater would gush up. However, digging a well was really physically demanding, so Xiaomei called her older brother, Wu Lei, over to help. Lei strained so hard that his face turned bright red, finally managing to bring some water up. But after filling just a small basin, he ran out of strength, let go of the handle, and sank back down again right by the edge of the well. Debeo quickly took over to try and seal the well, but it was already too late. The well began to emit a muffled, hollow sound. As soon as he heard it, he knew the water had gone down again. Debeo laughed mockingly at Lazy, saying he lacked strength and wasn't manly at all. Lazy refused to accept this insult, and the two of them found a spot to have a little showdown. Pessy didn't bother herself with these men's squabbles. Instead, she carefully washed the grapes clean, and then placed them one by one into Xiaobao and Arya's mouths. Xiaobao ate happily, gobbling them up one after another without stopping. "Xiaobao, if you eat too much, your teeth will start to ache. Eat a little less," Pessy said, her heart full of tenderness for her little brother. Unlike his older brother Debeo, Xiaobao wasn't the kind of boy who gave everyone a headache. Xiaobao was more obedient and well-behaved, though he did get sick every other day or so. Perhaps it was because he'd been born somewhat frail, and his parents hadn't paid close enough attention to his care in daily life. As soon as the weather changed even slightly, Xiaobao would easily develop a fever, catch a cold, get headaches, or suffer from diarrhea. Pessy decided that from this moment on, she would take full responsibility for caring for Xiaobao. Around noon, Uncle Wu Yud returned. Uncle Wu drove a 3-wheeled cart equipped with a canopy. Inside the cart were several wooden planks set aside for passengers to sit on. The cart was incredibly noisy. Its engine could be heard from 2 li away. This kind of three-wheeled cart was essentially equivalent to the buses of later years. When Wu Yit saw that his younger brother-in-law's family had also arrived, he was quite pleased. He hauled down 2 jean of meat from the cart and called out to Zhou Fong to start cooking it, saying he wanted to share a couple of drinks with Mike. The 2 jean of pork, with more fat than lean meat, was simmered by Zhou Fong together with 2 large heads of cabbage, filling up 2 huge bowls. Zhou Fong also picked several cucumbers from her own vegetable garden, pickled them, and stir-fried a few eggs. This was truly the highest-level hospitality that rural folks reserved for their guests. Mike and Wu Yit began drinking baijiu, passing glasses back and forth in a lively and convivial atmosphere. Zhou Fong beckoned a group of children to come eat meat, carefully picking the fatty, glistening pork and placing it into Dabao and Xiaobao's bowls. Dabao buried his head in his bowl, gobbling down the food with oil dripping from his mouth. Xiaobao, on the other hand, was more picky. He only liked lean meat and refused to touch the fatty bits. He bit off a chunk of fat and tried to put it into his older brother's bowl. Pei Qi immediately stopped him. Xiaobao, don't be so picky. Eat more of the fatty meat. It's good for your health. If you eat this fat, you'll never get sick. The last sentence was obviously just a little lie meant to coax the child, but it worked like magic on the 5-year-old Xiaobao. For a long time, Xiaobao hesitated between eating the fatty meat and getting a painful shot. His dilemma was no less intense than the feelings of a national leader making the momentous decision to launch reform and opening up. Finally, after much hesitation, he closed his eyes, shoved a whole chopstickful of fatty meat into his mouth, and swallowed it down without daring to chew it too much. Xiaobao, Zhou Fong said gently, see? The fatty meat is nutritious, good for your body, and delicious too. Remember to eat it from now on, okay? Only by eating plenty of fatty meat can you grow up to be a strong, manly lad. Pei Qi took the opportunity to educate Xiaobao. Under Pei Qi's relentless indoctrination, Xiaobao began to think that fatty meat wasn't as unappetizing as he'd imagined, and soon enough, he was eating quite a bit of it. From then on, little Xiaobao started to internalize the idea that whatever his older sister said must be right, and he lived perpetually under Pei Qi's intimidating influence. Of course, that's a story for later. Back in the present moment, Zhou Fong hadn't missed a single detail of this scene. Watching Pei Qi earnestly instruct her younger brother, Zhou Fong was utterly astonished. Turning to her sister-in-law, she said, "Second sister-in-law, Pei Qi really is a capable young lady. Look how, at such a young age, she already knows to tell Xiaobao not to be picky with his food." At that moment, Madeline also noticed that Xiaobao had stopped being choosy and was happily eating both fatty and lean meat together. The fact that Xiaobao was actually willing to listen to Pei Qi left Madeline equally amazed. Although Xiaobao is young, he has the same stubborn streak as Dabao. Really, really stubborn. Sometimes I even scold him, but he's so sly. He'll verbally agree to something, yet absolutely refuse to eat anything he doesn't feel like eating. Of the 4 children, Xiaobao is by far the pickiest eater. No fatty meat, no fish, no scallions or garlic. You could count on one hand the foods he actually loves. His weak health definitely has something to do with his diet. After hearing Zhou Fong's praise, Madeline felt delighted inside but still pretended to be modest on the outside. Don't me so much. My Pei is indeed very honest and obedient at home, but she's not nearly as eloquent and charming as your little May. Hey, that smug expression was impossible to hide. Even Arya could see it clearly. Pei stifled a chuckle in her heart and just lowered her head, focusing on eating. Of course, Zhou Fong wasn't blind to any of this, but she also liked Pei, who is sensible and capable, and then she glanced over at her own clueless little May. Normally, she doesn't look too bad, but compared to Pei, who sits there upright and proper, speaking clearly and logically, it's a world of difference. Second sister-in-law, please don't be so modest here. I've finally realized today, not only are your eldest and youngest children a joy to have, but Pei herself is such an easygoing kid. You've got something to look forward to now. These words struck a chord deep within Madeline's heart. Auntie, she said, I'm not afraid to laugh at myself. My 4 kids may be a bit much, and your second brother and I have been worrying about how we'll ever manage to raise them all. But when I think about it again, after getting through these few tough years and watching our kids grow up, no matter how hard we've worked, it'll all be worth it. Oh, the boundless love of parents everywhere. Pacey's eyes grew slightly moist. She'd always felt that DeBeo, being both her older brother and the family's firstborn, was the one most cherished by their parents, that Xiaobao, though frail and a boy, received the most attention from them, and that Arya, despite being a girl and the youngest child, was the one most spoiled. As for herself, she'd received the least amount of affection throughout her entire life. So, as she grew up gradually, her relationship with her siblings at home never became particularly close, and she gradually drifted apart from her parents as well. Looking back now, how could there be any parents who don't love their children? Just because they seem to pay a little less attention to her doesn't mean they didn't love her at all. Meanwhile, Zhou Fang was chatting with Madeline about kids, and Madeline happened to mention that Pacey was about to start first grade. Zhou Fang was taken aback when she heard that Pacey had actually asked for this herself. She was even more surprised. Her impression of Pacey kept getting better and better, and she began to wonder whether she should let her own little May enroll in school together with Pacey. Little May, who was always laughing carefree and oblivious, naturally had no idea what her mother was thinking or that her own fate was about to change just like Pacey's. At the time, Pacey herself hadn't imagined that starting school early would have such an impact on so many people around her, like Heisey, for instance, and little May. If we say that her new life has changed the trajectory of her own life, isn't it also changing the lives of those around her? Just as the flap of a butterfly's wings can set off a sea breeze in Hokkaido, how many people's lives will she actually influence? She was having a wonderful time at her aunt's house. The little orchard in front of her aunt's home was the kids' favorite playground. After finishing lunch, several children dashed off to the small orchard. DeBeo and Lazy climbed up onto the peach tree, scrambling here and there, competing to see who could climb faster and higher. DeBeo clearly had the upper hand. Once he got up into the tree, he moved with the agility of a nimble monkey, quickly darting from branch to branch until he reached the very top. DeBeo had superb athletic coordination. He excelled at all kinds of boyish games, like climbing trees and using slingshots to shoot marbles. If he ever got into trouble and made his parents angry, as soon as he spotted Mac holding out a stick, he'd take off running so fast that even adults couldn't catch up with him. As Pacey watched DeBeo, looking so full of confidence and vigor, her mind began to ponder the possibility of DeBeo attending a sports school in the future. There was no helping it. This had become a question that Pacey often found herself mulling over these days. Arya was still too young to consider for now. As for Xiaobao, the main issue was his lifestyle habits, which would require long-term discipline and restraint. Although DeBeo was 3 years older than herself, in Pacey's eyes at this moment, he was no different from a younger brother. She kept thinking about how she could subtly guide DeBeo away from his old ways and onto the right path without making a big deal out of it. Looking at DeBeo's long legs, his swift running speed, and his strength to lift heavy objects yet still maintaining flexibility, it was clear that DeBeo wasn't cut out for academic studies. If a sports school didn't place high demands on grades, there'd be a good chance he could succeed there. Pacey was already mentally calculating all the benefits she could instill in DeBeo if he decided to attend a sports school. Don't underestimate the power of words. Repeatedly saying something to someone's ears will naturally take root in their heart. At first, you might not notice any visible effect, but when the crucial moment comes, those words can profoundly influence a person's will and behavior. Pikey likes to quietly chant scriptures into DeBeo's ear whenever she has a moment. Big Brother is really amazing. A boy who can climb trees like you will definitely become an athlete when he grows up. Pikey looked up at DeBeo in the tree, imitating Arya's sweet and endearing tone, and even she herself found her voice so overly coquettish that she could hardly stand it. DeBeo loved this little sister's flattery and felt himself getting all giddy from the praise. Of course, I've yet to meet anyone who can climb trees better than me. But what exactly is an athlete? DeBeo wasn't entirely sure either, but whatever it was, it must be something great. Big Brother, do you know what an athlete is? Lazy deeply admired DeBeo and would grow up to become one of his most devoted followers. DeBeo scratched his head, trying to come up with an answer. Well, an athlete is just... Pikey quickly jumped in. An athlete is someone who takes part in sports competitions, right, big brother? You once told me how much you'd love to become an athlete and compete in all sorts of competitions when you grow up, said DeBeo, pondering with confusion. When on earth had he ever said something like that? But the single-celled DeBeo quickly dismissed the question as soon as he caught Lazy's admiring gaze fixed on the tree nearby. He chuckled softly to himself, feeling certain that he'd definitely become an athlete someday. As for what exactly an athlete does, well, wouldn't he figure that out once he grew up anyway? Thus, the ideal seed was planted deep within DeBeo's heart, even though at that moment, DeBeo had absolutely no idea what an ideal even meant. Lazy said enviously, DeBeo, you've already got your future figured out. That's so awesome. I still haven't thought about what I want to do when I grow up. Xiaomei said innocently, just drive Dad's tricycle. Once Dad gets old, he'll let you take over driving it. I'm never going to drive a tricycle. If I'm ever going to drive anything, it'll be a big car. Lazy's little face turned bright red. Against the backdrop of DeBeo's ambitious aspirations, driving a tricycle seemed utterly insignificant, hardly worth mentioning at all. The brother and sister were happily debating what kind of car they'd drive, one perched high up in a tree, the other standing below. DeBeo wrapped his arms around the tree trunk and slid down, then proudly presented a tiny peach he'd picked from the tree. Pei-Chi, here you go, have a bite. Pei-Chi was deeply touched. After all, no matter what, DeBeo was always a good older brother. She remembered vividly how, back when she was in elementary school, whenever someone bullied her, DeBeo would always step in and defend her. Over time, even by the time they reached junior high, no one dared to pick on her anymore. Everyone knew DeBeo was a master fighter, and he'd always stood up for his little sister. Though it wasn't impossible that DeBeo sometimes used these fights as an excuse to stir up trouble, his genuine kindness and protective nature toward his sister were truly admirable qualities worthy of praise. DeBeo had a total of 3 little peach fruits in his hand. Pei-Chi took them to the well, where DeBeo drew some water to wash them clean. She then gave 1 peach each to Xiaobao and Arya, and kept the last one for Xiaomei. Feeling a bit thirsty herself, Pei-Chi scooped up a bowl of water and took a sip. The water was cool, crystal clear, and had a faintly sweet aftertaste, something that today's tap water could never match. Pei-Chi felt deeply nostalgic for the well water she used to draw as a child. Today, the impression Pei-Chi made on her aunt was nothing short of remarkable. Seeing how she saved the peaches for her younger siblings and even set aside one for Xiaomei, Zhou Feng praised Pei-Chi once again. This only reinforced Zhou Feng's belief that Xiaomei and Pei-Chi should spend more time together so that Xiaomei could benefit from Pei-Chi's good influence. As the sky began to grow dark, after Xiaomei reluctantly said goodbye and Zhou Feng earnestly tried to persuade them to stay longer, the Zhou Wuqiang family finally set off on their way home. In a cheerful mood, Pei-Chi started humming a song. The sun is shining bright. The flowers are smiling at me. The little birds are saying. DeBeo joined in, and the two of them sang together. Mike and Madeline exchanged smiles, thinking that taking the kids over to visit relatives today was indeed a great idea. The heat was so stifling it was driving everyone crazy. Even the electric fan couldn't provide much relief, let alone air conditioning. Patsy took a big gulp of cool herbal tea and finally felt a bit better. In summer, everyone used to just scoop up some cold water straight from the tap and drink it. No one ever thought of drinking iced tea. But little Bao, her younger brother, tended to get diarrhea whenever he drank cold water. So Patsy boiled some hot water, let it cool down, and waited until Bao felt thirsty before giving him a sip. The cups they used for holding hot water were large, white porcelain cups with handles. Back then, no one had glass or stainless steel cups. Every household relied on these sturdy porcelain cups. 2 of those big porcelain cups could fill an entire thermos bottle. Ever since Bao started drinking iced tea this summer, he rarely got diarrhea anymore. Madeline happily credited Patsy for this improvement. Soon after, the whole family began drinking iced tea as well. Of course, Big Bow was an exception. He'd always gulp down well water by the bucketful as soon as he felt even a hint of heat, and no matter how much anyone tried to persuade him otherwise, he just couldn't change his habit. Peggy thought helplessly. After all, since childhood, DeBeo has always been as tough as a rock anyway, so she might as well stop trying to force him. As summer arrived, DeBeo would strip down to just his underpants every single day and run around everywhere. Sometimes he'd even sneak out of the house secretly to go swimming in the pond. Once, Madeline caught him and gave him a severe beating, finally making him behave for a few days. But as soon as those few days were over, he couldn't resist the temptation of his friends again and ran off once more. Madeline had simply given up on trying to control him and just let him be. Peggy sometimes wondered. DeBeo's personality was already like a wild horse that had broken free from its reins, and with his parents' indulgence to boot, it was no wonder he'd only become worse as he grew older. Still, these past few days had been so hot that even DeBeo didn't feel like going outside anymore. He said the sun could bake you so thoroughly that you'd stick right to the ground. Peggy couldn't help but burst into laughter at his brilliant analogy. Hey, anyone want an ice pop? From afar, Peggy heard the vendor's call, and DeBeo's eyes instantly lit up. Mom, the ice pop seller is here. I want an ice pop. Madeline was startled by his sudden loud voice and scolded DeBeo. Why are you making such a racket? Aria just fell asleep. Don't go and wake her up. DeBeo immediately rushed over, frantically tugging at the hem of Madeline's clothes. Mom. He drew out the word mom in an unusually long, lingering tone. The ice cream vendor is coming. Buy me one, please. Madeline wasn't very happy about it and didn't agree right away. As DeBeo heard the vendor's calls getting closer and closer, he grew more and more anxious. Mom, just buy one, please. Just one. I want one too. Xiao Bao chimed in, unhappy after hearing what DeBeo said. He wanted one as well. Pacey also felt like having one, but she kept quiet. She knew their family wasn't well off and rarely bought snacks for the kids. Unable to resist DeBeo and Xiao Bao any longer, Madeline finally gave in. All right, let's buy them all. Go call the ice cream vendor over here. DeBeo perked up and, taking Xiao Bao along, shouted at the top of his lungs. Hey, ice pop seller, come on over. We want to buy some ice pops. A big, old bicycle rolled up. The ice pop seller was a man in his 40s. On the back seat of his bike was a huge wooden box, wrapped on the outside with a layer of cotton quilt. His face was drenched in sweat, and his voice was already hoarse from shouting. What kind of ice pops would you like? Madeline stepped forward, holding a 5-cent coin in her hand. 3 red bean ice pops, please. DeBeo's favorite was the puff snow cone ice cream, which cost 2 cents each. I want the puff snow cone ice cream. But he immediately got a sharp glare from his mother and dared not say another word. Instead, he stared eagerly as the vendor quickly opened the wooden box and pulled out 3 red bean ice pops. Peachy, you have one too. Taking the 2 cents change from the vendor, Madeline handed an ice pop to DeBeo and Xiao Bao, then kept the last one for Peachy herself. Peachy had originally thought there'd be no ice pops for her, but now this unexpected treat came as a delightful surprise, and she quickly reached out to take it. The red bean popsicle was bright red and square-shaped, with only the front slightly rounded and dotted with bits of red beans. It was too hard to bite into, so she had to lick it slowly, one tiny bite at a time. Once it had melted just a bit, she could finally take a proper bite and savor the cool, sweet flavor of the red beans. At only 10 cents per stick, these popsicles were truly affordable and delicious, exactly what Peachy loved most. Back then, ice pop vendors rode around on bicycles, their boxes strapped securely to the bikes, calling out as they went from street to street. Hey, ice pops! Who wants an ice pop? Their cheerful cries often filled children's hearts with longing and excitement. What a wonderful thing it was to enjoy an ice pop on such a sweltering summer day. No child who heard that call could resist asking for one. Parents who were generous would happily buy them a popsicle. Those who were more frugal might scold, or even spank, a child who insisted on having one when they really couldn't afford it later on. Supermarkets began selling ice cream from numerous brands, offering a dazzling array of flavors and shapes, so many varieties that it was hard to choose. But back then, the popsicles sold by street vendors came in just 3 basic types, all rectangular in shape. The most common was the water popsicle, priced at 5 cents per stick, usually light red or yellow. It had a cloyingly sweet taste. A bit better were the red bean popsicles, costing 10 cents each. Those little half sticks of red beans were exceptionally delicious. The priciest were the puffed ice creams, whose name somehow stuck. Priced at 20 cents per stick, they were treats one rarely splurged on. Indeed, they were incredibly sweet and fragrant, quite large in size, with a creamy aroma reminiscent of today's ice cream. They were especially popular and eagerly sought after by children. If a child happened to hold such a puffed ice cream in his hand, he'd surely be reluctant to gobble it down all at once. He'd rather carry it around for a while, showing it off to his friends before finally taking a bite. Debao quickly finished his own popsicle. Impatient, he licked it bite by bite, then took a hearty bite crunch, and chomped off a big chunk in one go. It felt wonderfully satisfying as he chewed away, taking bites left and right until the whole thing was gone in just a few mouthfuls. After finishing, Debao smacked his lips noisily, still not quite sated and already longing for more. His eyes darted over to Xiaobao's hand. "Xiaobao, let me have a bite of your popsicle." Xiaobao glanced at his brother with a wary look, despite the gentle tone in his voice, and quickly tucked the popsicle behind his back. "Don't you have one already? Why do you want mine?" "No way. I've already finished mine. Could you just let me have a bite of yours?" Xiaobao shook his head vigorously, refusing outright. Seeing that Madeline was inside the house and couldn't see them, Debao grew bolder. He reached out, snatched the half-eaten popsicle from Xiaobao's hand, took a huge bite, and then handed it right back to Xiaobao. "Wah!" Xiaobao burst into tears, startling Madeline and Patsy, who were inside the house. As soon as Madeline came out and saw what had happened, she immediately realized that Debao had bullied his little brother again. She scolded Debao a few words and then went over to comfort Xiaobao. But Xiaobao was stubborn and refused to eat the ice pop in his hand anymore. "My big brother took a huge bite out of it already, so I'm not eating this tiny bit left." Madeline felt utterly helpless. "Xiaobao, just eat it somehow. Those ice pop vendors have all gone. How about we wait until tomorrow when they're back, and Mom will buy you another one?" Yet Xiaobao kept crying nonstop. Madeline was getting a headache from all the fuss, and seeing Debao still staring longingly at the little bit of ice pop in Xiaobao's hand made her even angrier. With a sharp slap, she smacked Debao right on the bottom. "Do you even have any sense of being a big brother? It's one thing if you don't know how to give way to your little brother, but how could you actually snatch his food and eat it yourself?" This slap didn't even hurt Big Bao. "It might as well not have happened at all," he said confidently. "I was just eating for him, because I saw he couldn't finish his portion. If he eats too much, he'll get diarrhea. My body's strong, so it's totally fine for me to eat more." Madeline couldn't help but laugh and shake her head. She ignored Big Bao's brazen behavior and went back to comforting Little Bao. Pacey walked over to Little Bao and handed him the popsicle she'd only taken 2 bites of. "Little Bao, come on. Have this one from your big sister. There's plenty left, and look, it's got red beans all over. It's so delicious. Here, take it." Little Bao stopped crying and broke into a smile. He took the popsicle from Pacey's hand and ran inside to enjoy it. Pacey then passed the popsicle Little Bao had been holding back to Big Bao. "Brother, here you go, have some." At first, Big Bao reached out his hand, but then, remembering that Pacey hadn't even finished her own 2 bites, he hesitated and pulled his hand back again, saying with a blush, "You go ahead. I've already had one myself." Even Debao can feel shy sometimes. Peachy found it really unusual and couldn't help but laugh. She shoved an ice pop into Debao's mouth, saying, "Here, you eat it. I'm not really in the mood to eat today." Finally, everyone was happy. Debao happily took the ice pop and ran off to play, while Xiaobao sat inside, eating with a big smile on his face. Madeline felt deeply relieved. Peachy not only knew how to love her little brother but also knew how to be considerate and yield to her older brother. She was truly wonderful. It was just heartbreaking how such a little kid could be so thoughtful and mature. even though she herself hadn't even taken 2 bites yet. Next time, she'd make sure to give Peachy some extra treats. From then on, none of the Zhou children ever argued again over who got to eat ice pops. The next day, as soon as that vendor's call rang out, Madeline rushed out to buy 1 puffed ice cream cone and 3 red bean popsicles. Of course, the puffed ice cream cone was for Peachy, who had been so obedient and well-behaved. The other 3 kids each got a red bean popsicle. Both Xiaobao and Aria had no objections to this arrangement. As for Debeo, who really should have had something to say, he felt a bit guilty toward his little sister because of what had happened the day before, so he obediently kept quiet without saying a word. Pexi, knowing that puffed ice cream was Debeo's favorite treat, proactively offered to swap with him. Reluctantly giving in, Debeo couldn't help but feel increasingly fond of his little sister. Madeline was truly delighted to see the 4 children getting along so harmoniously. When Mike came home and saw all the kids happily eating popsicles, he found it rather unusual. Madeline rarely ever dished out such generosity. After hearing Madeline explain what had been going on these past couple of days, he couldn't help but smile with joy. Geez, our kids have all become so much more sensible than they used to be. Madeline nodded with a smile and said, Debeo has always been mischievous since he was little. But then again, not many boys are ever really well-behaved. Xiaobao hasn't been sick nearly as often lately, and she stopped being as picky about food as she used to be. Pexi, though 3 years younger than Debeo, actually seems more like his older sister. She's far more mature and responsible than he is. I'm sure our second daughter will end up just like her older sister someday, Mike said, nodding in agreement. The 2 of them then started talking about the upcoming school term. Damn it, there are only 2 days left until school starts. Between Debeo and Pexi, their tuition fees add up to over $30. Do we have enough money? Madeline did a quick mental calculation. We've got $26 in cash right now. And if I sell the eggs, both chicken and duck, at the market tomorrow, I figure I can probably get $4 or $5 for them. Still, we're short by a few bucks. Why don't I go talk to my older brother and ask him to lend us some money? We can pay him back in a few days when we've got it, Mike suggested. Madeline disagreed. We still haven't paid back the $10 we borrowed from him last time. How could we possibly ask him for more? Why don't I just bag up a sack of wheat from home and take it to the grain station tomorrow? That should be enough to cover the cost. Then let's sell a sack of wheat. We'll get up early tomorrow morning and go together.